This is the Next Bite of Life podcast, the place to be to hear personal stories from expats, digital nomads, and everybody else taking their next bite of life. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Next Bite of Life podcast and videocast. Today, my guest is Tim Leffel, and he is an author, a publisher, an editor. He does it all, and he's talking to us from Mexico. How are you today, Tim?
Good. Things are nice here. It's sunny and beautiful, so it's a good day.
We're so jealous over here because, unfortunately for us, it's been really cold. But hey, we take it. We can't have it all sunny all the time. Now, Tim, please tell us exactly where in Mexico you're at.
So I'm in a city called Guanajuato, which is a kind of a mouthful, but it's kind of an old indigenous word that the Spanish, put their own spin on. But I'm about 4 hours north of Mexico City and about an hour and a half from a city called San Miguel de Allende, which is a big retirement center for Americans and Canadians. So more people know about that one. But I'm in the same state and also another UNESCO World Heritage City, so a lot of history here, and it's very walkable. There's more pedestrian streets than ones with cars on them, so I like that a lot.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. And is it one of those colorful places where the houses are all different colors?
Yeah, a lot of that, and they sort of spill down the hillsides, and so it's pretty.
Nice. Now, there's a place I've never been to. I've been to Mexico City and Puerto Vallarta, Nueva Vallarta, Taxco, Cuernavaca, but I've never been around there. So I guess there's still, plenty of places for me to discover, I guess. How long have you been living in Mexico?
So I've been here on and off for about 10 years, but I had a daughter who was in school, and so that makes things kind of complicated. So we were going back and forth between Tampa Bay, Florida, and here, and we went back for 3 years at the end for her to finish high school in the U.S. and get a, U.S. diploma. We could talk about this more. I'm sure it's come up on your show before. I think elementary school doesn't matter too much where you are, but then the further up you get, the more standardized testing you have and all that stuff. So anyway, but she did go to school here for 3 years in Spanish. So her Spanish is a lot better than mine.
That's great. I was just going to say, so she must be really fluent, which is fantastic. How have you been keeping up with the Spanish? Has it been really hard for you? I know I have a hard time.
Well, it's been tougher during this pandemic because, I work from home anyway, and we've been holed up even more, trying to be safe. So I haven't been out interacting as much as I would normally. And I feel like I'm kind of at a plateau. And so I actually just downloaded some books the other day that are more reading kind of things, short stories in Spanish, that kind of thing. So I can at least try to passively absorb some more.
But here's the important question. Can you order beer and margaritas?
Yeah. I could get by. I mean, all the basics, the traveler kind of Spanish I can do fine with. It's just when it gets into more intense discussions, I get lost.
Yeah, I understand that because I'm having the same problem. But, poco a poco, like they say, right?
Right.
So now, Tim, tell me, you've been there off and on for 10 years. Before that, you were also, I call this experimental expatting. That's what I sort of call these things, where you try different places. And I know before that, you were living in Turkey, right? One of the places that you lived in?
Yeah, when I was younger, we went backpacking around the world for 3 times, actually.
Oh,
circled
wow.
the globe. And part of that was we taught English. We did it in Istanbul, Turkey, and a suburb of Seoul, Korea. Very different experiences and very different students. But I really enjoyed that life of actually living somewhere instead of passing through. And so we kind of took a break from long-term travel when we had a child, but we kept thinking in the back of our mind, we wanted to get back to that again at some point. So I think when she was 10, we moved to Mexico the first time for a year. And so, we didn't want to go to the other side of the world again because I think that makes things difficult from time zones and seeing your family and all of that. So we kind of stayed fairly close. But once we can all start moving around again, we're hoping, my wife and I are hoping to do more of that. Go just live somewhere for 2 or 3 months,
Yeah.
and then go to the next place, and use this as our base still, but not be stuck here all the time.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. It's been really hard. A lot of people, especially travelers and expats, and they're used to travel and they want to travel, and all of a sudden you can't do it. And it's like just because you can't do it makes you want to do it more. That's what I've been finding
Yeah,
people are saying. But I've been like, okay, that's it. We can't travel. That's it. I think we had such a hard time trying to get back to Spain after being in Italy when it hit that it just cured me for a little bit. I'm like, I'm okay with that because I don't want to get stuck again. It was just too stressful. But
yeah,
how
that could
is
be a
life
nightmare.
there now?
Well, unfortunately, I think the situation in Mexico is very similar to the U.S., and for a lot of the same reasons, just not very good leadership at the top, and
Mm.
kind of a muddled message there for a while. And the president was going around hugging people like a month
Ugh.
after this all happened, after it all started.
Oh
So that doesn't
no.
send a very good signal.
Exactly.
But fortunately, a lot of the mayors and governors were much more adamant about putting things in place. But yeah, it's a tough situation here because I feel like almost everyone's wearing a mask now and being careful finally.
Yeah.
But you've got people living in very close quarters in a lot of
Yes.
cases, and a lot of people, kind of live that underground economy life where they run a taco stand or a
Yeah.
gordita stand or something, or they walk the streets delivering things. And so it's hard to really make people lock down without just completely killing the
Completely.
economy. And
Yeah.
so they're trying to walk that fine line. And unfortunately, this thing's so contagious that it's not working very well.
Yeah, ugh, that sucks. But I think this is probably where we're at for the next. Everybody was saying, hopefully 2021 will be better, but I think it's just going to be more of the same for a
Yeah.
while. It's unprecedented. So what are you going to do
You
now,
just got to
Tim?
hope the jabs and the arm work, and that,
Yeah.
they get out there in big quantities.
Yes. Maybe that'll help. Now, Tim, let's talk about. I know for anybody listening or watching the show, if you're a traveler or you're hoping to move to someplace else, more than likely you've come in contact with Tim's book, and it's called A Better Life for Half the Price. Now, tell us about that book a little bit and how it came to be and everything that you can, just sort of share with us.
Yeah, sure. I'll hold it up here. This is the
Yes.
second edition, uh, and it's a pretty thick one. So if it
Wow.
doesn't answer your questions after all that, then maybe I can't help you out on that.
I know, really.
But yeah, it's not that price has changed all that much, but the old one was 5 or 6 years old, and people start looking at the copyright date and assuming it's
Ah,
all out of date. But
of course.
fortunately, most of the countries that are highlighted in here, and there's 19 of them, prices are pretty similar to where they were 5 or 6 years ago, partly just because the dollar has stayed strong or
Yeah.
even gone up in some places. Um, your neighbor Portugal is a little more expensive just because it's
Whew.
gotten so popular,
Yes.
and lots of Brits have moved there and bought real estate. That kind
Yes.
of
And
drives
they
up
have pushed
prices.
everybody out.
And Thailand's currency has gotten stronger for some reason, so that one's a little more expensive. But most of the others are pretty similar. But anyway, I did make a few country changes, and the good thing this time around is because everybody was locked up at home and sheltered at home, I was able to interview people pretty easily. It was pretty easy to get
Yeah.
a hold of people. So I
Mm,
think I interviewed about 80 expats this time around, on
that's
the
great.
phone or by email, and so I got to really get the inside scoop from a lot of people living in places that I had not been to lately or certainly hadn't lived in. So it
Yeah.
was good to get that perspective. And but basically it's rundowns of specific countries, but then the whole first third or so is about trying to answer questions about the process and choosing your right, your perfect location and what you have to take care of before you leave, all the
Uh-huh.
nitty gritty kind of stuff. And also, I'm trying to discourage people that this is not right for, because it's not the right thing for everybody to
For
do.
every
And you know.
I am so glad you mentioned that because, I know I always tell people you need to do your due diligence before you start taking off and do this. There are things for sure that you definitely need to cross off your list. And, to have a little bit of guidance is definitely helpful. It's a small investment because when you think about it, once you get over there, it's not that easy to just say, hey, I mean, yeah, you can always come back home. But if you do your homework, let's say before you leave, then it's a lot easier to assimilate into the country that you're going to. So it's nice that this book helps people. Now, of all the countries in where people are staying, what do you think the country is that has the lowest cost of living actually? Like, can you disclose that? You don't have to, but if you can, it
No,
would be
no, it's
great.
fine. There's kind of a leader in each area of the world. I think probably in Central America, it's Nicaragua, and in South America, it's Bolivia, but not many people move there. So let's say Ecuador. um,
Yes, because
Ecuador also has a really low income requirement for you to get permanent residency. It's these days it's around $400 for a
oh
single
wow,
person and 600 for a couple. Which, not that you can really live on that,
live
but
on the yeah, but
that's
that's
their minimum to get residency. So it's very easy. Um, and then in Europe, where you are, I would say it's probably either Bulgaria or Albania. And Albania is kind of an interesting one because if you're an American, you can stay for a year on a tourist visa. So
hmm
a lot of those European countries, you have to leave the whole zone after
Schengens.
3 months, the whole
Exactly.
Schengen zone.
Uh-huh.
So Albania, you can stay a while. Bulgaria, you can't. But yeah, it's a bargain there. And then in Asia, it's probably Cambodia, just in terms of
Oh,
pure,
that's
pure
surprising.
cost of living. Yeah, and a lot of this is just related to what the average wage is in the country, what the
Very
wealth
true.
is in the country. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the best value. So, people need to look beyond that and
Yeah,
say, well, it's the cheapest, but I don't want to live there
exactly.
for one reason or another. And
Yeah,
I mean, if you go to stay in Southeast Asia and you go to Malaysia instead, for instance, it's an incredible value there for what you get for your money in terms of renting an apartment. I mean, you can get beautiful 3 or 4 bedroom modern place for $600 or $800 a month. So for a lot of
wow.
people, that outweighs maybe how much they have to spend to go out to eat. And not that it's expensive, but maybe it's a little more than Cambodia. But you get such a great value in your rent expense that that outweighs a lot of other things.
Exactly. And the cost of eating out and everything is pretty cheap in those places.
Yeah.
But I think if you find out what you're willing to live without, then it makes it easy to you can narrow down what countries you can go to. And then of course, the money and think about that and see what kind of fits the whole package, which
Right.
is
Plus,
great.
there's a lot of low hanging fruit, especially from the U.S. I mean, your rent's going to go down by half or more probably, but healthcare is a huge one too. I mean, Americans pay
Yes.
a fortune for healthcare, and most of them don't realize that the rest of the world does not operate that way.
And they don't want to. What's amazing to me is like they don't want to even consider that there are better ways to do it. This is what makes me really upset, I guess. They hear you can move to another country and pay low. No, 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 no. We do it the best way here, obviously, so there's no way. What are you going to get for that? A
Yeah.
toenail thing. But hey, you're proof that it's doable. I'm proof that it's doable, and a lot of people are doing it. Now, let's go back a little bit to when you were in Florida. I know I sort of read up on some things, and I know you were saying like the cost of living for you was like $3,000 a month. Sometimes, like when you count everything. So
Yeah, more
compared
than
to
that
now,
usually.
yeah,
um, So yeah, our rent was $2,100 a month when we lived in Tampa, and it was a nice place and a good
yeah,
school district, but it wasn't anything luxurious, that's for
Yeah,
sure. And
yeah.
and that's just the U.S. I mean, we were in a
Exactly.
mid-sized city. If you live in San Francisco or New York, you're going to pay far more than that
Uh-huh.
for a studio.
Yes.
So we had a three-bedroom place, and it was nice. It was near downtown, but and then you add all the other things on top. I'm self-employed, so health insurance is a fortune. Start
Yeah,
off with that. Then we had a car and car insurance and utilities and everything else. So yeah, it can add up to a few grand every month
yeah,
before you
definitely.
even start having any fun.
And how stressful is that, you know? Especially
uh,
when you're self-employed and you've got to like manage your money right. How stressful is it on your marriage, on your kids? I mean, it's like it's worrying. And it's
yeah.
like, you have years and years and years of that. It doesn't make for a very good, you know, way to live, right?
Yeah, it adds a lot of stress to your life and tension in your family. And it's also frustrating, I think, to know that you've got to hit 4 grand a month, let's just say, before
Before
your
anything.
expenses are covered. And so you got to get to that point just to cover things. And then you can start thinking about all the extras.
Is so like when what made you start thinking? Was it because you had traveled before to like Korea and you had lived in Istanbul? Did that make you think maybe we should start thinking about moving somewhere else? What was that nail in the coffin? Like what was what led to the ultimate thing?
Well, it was in the back of our mind all the time, and we had talked about it. Once our daughter was old enough that we could take off, and so it wasn't even the financial thing. That was not the main motivation. It was
Uh,
more just to live in another culture. But then we had traveled around Mexico, and we actually used to have a little beach house that we just kind of bought as a getaway place. Because at the time we lived in Nashville, Tennessee, which is landlocked in the middle of the country.
see.
Um, but so we had traveled around Mexico a bit already, but only on vacation and
Mhm.
getaways. But I knew how cheap it was there and how cheaply we could live. And then when we sort of did a trial run in Guanajuato, which I would strongly recommend anybody to do, we came for a month, lived in a neighborhood and rented an apartment and, bought groceries, went to the butcher shop, went to the bakery, all that kind of stuff just to get a feel. So I knew what we could live for and how cheap it could be compared to the US. So then the the financial factors started coming
So,
in too as another motivator. But yeah, really, it was just to live in a different culture and give our daughter that experience too. I mean, I don't know if she fully appreciates it yet, but
yeah.
she uh, she already has found out that having a second language on your resume can definitely get you a closer look when you're
Yeah.
applying for jobs.
Exactly. What a leg up. I mean, she's got one of the main languages to learn. I mean,
Yeah, it's
it's
very
like,
useful.
yeah, you got English and you got Spanish under your belt. You're pretty much covered like over three-quarters of the world. So the world
Yeah.
is hers. That's fantastic. Now, how would can you quantify the cost of living like a month for you for three people? So a couple and a kid.
Yeah, I always just say rule of thumb is what we spend on rent in the U.S. is what we spend on everything here. That's when
Wow.
there's three of us.
Yeah.
When my daughter's not here, she's been living with us for a while, but she's going back next month. Um, when she's not here, it goes down, of course, when it's just two people, and then we probably get by for 1,500 or so a month. And we're
I
not
see.
being careful. I want to
Yeah, yeah.
emphasize that that's not being frugal. That's going out to eat and having fun and going to the symphony and concerts,
It's
which of
amazing.
course a lot of that stuff went on hold for a while.
Yeah.
So there was a point during the pandemic, I think we were spending $700 or $800 a month for
You're
two
just
of us.
like, where
You
can
know,
I put this money? Where can I throw it? What else can I buy? Right?
but I gotta put a caveat in there though that we own our house here free and clear, which
Okay.
is pretty much the only way you can buy a house in a lot of these countries. You have to sort of buy it outright because
Yep.
there's not much of a mortgage system.
Mortgage, no, no
But
such thing.
so if we wanted to rent a house that was like ours, we would pay about 800 a month for rent.
Okay.
So still, I think we could probably still get by for 15 or 1600 a month,
Mhm.
for two of us
For two.
because the rest of the expenses are so low. I mean, our electric bill is literally about $10 a month. The water bill's about the same. So utilities are not much. Um, But yeah, actually, when we've rented out our house to people long term, we've rented it for 800 a month, and that includes utilities, that includes
Mhm.
a housekeeper, and so that's pretty deep. That's pretty normal for a, let's say, a 2 or 3 bedroom place. You can rent a 1 bedroom here for 500 really easily,
Wow.
sometimes less. There's a university in my city, so that always brings down the cost of
Yeah,
housing
yeah,
because students can't afford but so much. So.
exactly.
Uh, so
So they gotta
yeah,
they gotta buddy up.
yeah, and those prices are pretty similar across central Mexico. Not in Mexico City, and maybe not in San Miguel de Allende because it's a pretty popular place. But
Mhm.
almost anywhere else in the interior of Mexico, away from the beach, that's a pretty normal range for rental prices.
That's great. It sounds, very reasonable, and it's one of the reasons why Mexico is so popular with people. It's close to the U.S., and you can. I mean, really, for the price of a margarita at a restaurant in the U.S., you could pay your light bill. I mean, it doesn't go
Yeah.
much better than that. It's fantastic. Now, for the listeners, who think like everybody in Mexico is retired and all day long you sit by the fire and whatever. You want to make it clear that you're still working and you still have an income coming in, right?
Yeah, I am, and on that point, internet access has gotten a lot faster here from when I first moved. So
Oh,
that's a
great.
good point. Now you can get fiber optic to the home quite fast.
Oh,
So that's good. But yeah, there's a lot of people still working in Mexico. And this past year, a lot more digital nomads have moved here because you can get 6 months on a tourist visa in Mexico. And
wow.
then
I
you
didn't know
just
it was
have
6 months. Wow.
yeah, and then you just have to leave and come back. So a lot of those digital nomads that were bopping around the world, or living in Thailand or Bali or
Hmm.
wherever, and had to find a new place, ended
Yeah.
up coming here. And a lot of them around Puerto Vallarta or Playa del Carmen, the beach areas. But a fair number have moved to Merida and Mexico City and other places too, because yeah, the costs are good, the weather's nice, and it's easy to get where you need to go. Not just back to the U.S., but there's pretty good flight choices from Cancun and from Mexico City and other places. So it's fairly easy to get somewhere else. But yeah, often a flight to Mexico won't be much more than a flight across the U.S. So it's not that expensive to get here. It's not expensive to live. So it's an easy choice for a lot of people.
That's great. Now, you also, in addition to working, I mean, you've written tons of articles for online magazines. You reported from over 5 continents. Now, you also now, I know because I was familiar with your blog called Travel Writing 2.0, and that was the first time I actually knew about you. And I know that some of the articles on there are like top notch. So you actually help others develop their writing skills. Like, what is it? What does it entail? This.
Yeah, my Travel Writing 2.0 book, which is also in its second edition, is about really how to make money at this, how to earn a living or at least make a part time set of earnings for my side hustle. And so I'm not writing about the craft so much. I mean, I've won awards for my writing, and I think I'm a decent writer, but that's not what that book is about or
Yeah.
the blog. It's more about taking it seriously as a business, either as a freelancer or a podcaster or a blogger, whatever. What are the opportunities in this digital landscape to actually make some money at your craft? And so that's what I'm trying to help people with on there. And I have a course also that's called Travel Writing Overdrive for people that want to really get serious about it. Um, and so I'm kind of trying to be the wise old man saying I've done everything. I've tried all the things that are out there just about it. I haven't done a podcast. I'll leave that to you. But all the writing things I've probably done it. I've kind of figured out what works and what doesn't.
But
And
doesn't work.
also what people waste their time on. I mean, there's a lot of things people waste their time on that don't really move the needle in terms of earnings. And so I'm trying to
Yeah, that
tell
would be
people
that
that,
would be me.
yeah, I mean, it's easy, all these social media platforms are very addictive and
Yes.
they made them that way for a reason,
Uh-huh.
they want you to spend as much time on there as possible. But also, there's other things you could be doing that maybe just aren't moving you forward that we've all got the same number of hours, right? It just depends on how you spend them. And I like to enjoy life too. I mean, I get 8 hours of sleep a night. I have fun with my family. I take real vacations. So I'm not advocating to be a workaholic. Just concentrate on what makes a difference.
Yeah. Now you forgot to mention the other book called The World's Cheapest Destinations, right? Because you've got lots of things in the oven. You've got this books, and I'm like reading about it, going, "Geez, this is great because this is what people need to know."
Yeah, I do strongly believe in multiple streams of income, and some business gurus will tell you to focus on one thing and put 100% of your effort into it. But
We know what can happen with that,
yeah, what can
right?
happen if you're a person who writes about international travel and that's all
Yes,
you do?
exactly. Oh my
So
God, the landscape is just horrible right now to like watch.
yeah, so I think whether you're talking about investments or you're talking about your business, I think it's good to be diversified. So yeah, I've always had my hand in different things, but I actually started my cheapest destinations blog back in 2003. So I was one of
Oh
the
wow.
pioneers. And I actually just started the blog because I put out this book called The World's Cheapest Destinations. And that was the very first edition. And it was ugly and riddled with typos and everything else. But some people bought it, so I figured I was onto something. So I started the blog just to help publicize the book, to help people
Oh, I
find me.
see.
So like if journalists put cheapest places to travel in Google, they would end up finding me and do an interview. So that's why I started it. But then it became a business on its own eventually. And but yeah, it's funny. So these two books are kind of related in the sense that when I first started that blog, all I was talking about was cheap travel and bargains and how to find the best deals and where to go and travel well for less. And I wrote a lot about round the world travel when I started. But then, that was before we started getting thousands of people bopping around the world and blogging about their travels and starting their Instagram feed and everything else. So I've shifted to talking more about the living abroad aspect in the last few years, just because it's not as competitive um, and also during this pandemic, it has made a lot more sense because people aren't doing round the world trips right now, but they are thinking about where they're going to move later. And so
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
we have to pivot when when
Yeah.
situations change.
What do you see? Like, if you had to predict for somebody who's been in the industry for such a long time, what do you predict will happen to the travel landscape as far as, not just digital nomads, but people wanting to move? Do you think we're anywhere close this year, next year? Like, what is your prediction?
Yeah, well, first of all, some of the industry changes we've seen have been a long time coming. It was just kind of a slow moving train that sped up in the past year. I'm talking,
Full speed ahead.
yeah. I mean, I'm talking about the decline in print magazines, first of all. I mean, we could all see that coming for ages. It's just
Yes.
it accelerated this past year. And one thing that most people didn't see coming was a lot of these custom publications went out of business or they suspended. And I'm talking about airline magazines, cruise magazines, hotel magazines, things like that. A lot of those went under because, there wasn't such a need for them. And I don't know if they're going to come back. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But that's going to be a tough thing for the next few years to be a freelance writer trying to write for magazines. There's just not going to be many outlets, and those that are out there aren't taking as many articles about international travel because nobody can travel
Yeah,
to those
exactly.
places. Um, what we also saw coming for a long time was a saturation in the number of travel bloggers and,
Mm.
although I hate the word, travel influencers, people that are just
You mean
posing for pretty
you don't like my
pictures.
hat? My hat.
Yeah.
Here's my big hat covering up like Piazza Navona. Here's my big hat covering up. I'm just
Yeah. And so there's some account that posts, Instagram pictures that are similar, like somebody in a canoe on Lake Moraine in Canada, it's like there's hundreds of them that are so similar and it's so funny. Yeah. They've all got the hat on and they're
yes.
posing, looking back. But anyway, I think there's been a shakeout there and there will continue to be a shakeout. And, so the people that really have something to say and then that have a specific audience in mind are going to do well. And I think a lot of those generalists are kind of going to fall by the wayside. But you are really asking about travel itself, I think. And I think it's hard for any of us to know, but hopefully, as more people get vaccinated, we'll start seeing in the second half of this year and into 2022 that people will start gradually going back to, the bigger world out there instead of just doing road trips on their home turf. That's been
Yes.
the trend for the last year or so, which isn't a bad thing. I mean, it's nice for people to explore their own backyard and,
Yes.
be able to see more, but it's been tough on the tourism industry. It's been tough for hotel owners, and
Yes.
tour companies have just been decimated. I mean, if you're a
Yes.
tour guide, it's been a tough time to,
Yeah.
you got to find something else to do. And I really worry about some of these ecotourism initiatives. The big promise in places in Africa and South America and other spots has been that, oh, well, if you protect these animals instead of poaching them, you can make money through tourism instead. But then when the tourists don't show up, then what happens? And so
Mm.
I'm a little worried about that, and rainforest protection and things like that. Those aspects of travel, they really need to get people back in there, or it's going to be
Devastating.
devastating in the
Yeah.
long term.
Yeah. It's kind of, yeah, it's like there are two sides of the coin. You sort of feel bad because all these places, especially Spain, is suffering right now because there's no tourism. And, it's just unreal. The hotels are closed and it's just horrible. But you think back to like last year when everybody was like, tourists go home and all that stuff.
Over
And,
tourism.
yeah, it's almost like, yeah, it's almost like, be careful what you wish for because, now
Yeah.
they've got it. And now it's like, how do we fix it? Is there a middle point to anything? I mean, nobody knows at this point. And we just
Yeah.
hope, like you say, that it comes back in some way.
I imagine if you're a regular run-of-the-mill resident of Venice, you're pretty happy right now. You
Yes,
finally got your city back. But if you're
exactly.
somebody who bought 10 Airbnb apartments to rent out, you're not so happy.
No, you're not. No, you're not. You're actually crying now and trying to get rid of it. Even like here, they changed the rules of Airbnb. Now it has to be just first floor only, and every
Mm,
apartment on that floor has to be an Airbnb too. So a lot of people
wow.
that bought the apartment were suddenly screwed because the neighbor is like, "No, this is my house. I'm not doing it." So, a friend of mine was like, I looked out of my apartment and the police were there kicking somebody out. And they said it's no longer an Airbnb because the neighbor wasn't Airbnb and called, the cops on them. And so
Wow.
they were screwed. And it's just like things like this are happening all over the place. And it's just funny to see. But, this is what we asked for, I guess. And this
Yeah.
is,
I mean, yeah, there's definitely pluses and minuses. I mean, the air's gotten cleaner and
yes.
less garbage in some of these places.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a lot of lost jobs, and some of those might never come back.
Yeah. I know. Well, let me end the conversation, which has been great because I learned a lot, and I hope everybody listening, and I'll have on the website, of course, I have all your information, the books, the websites where they can get in touch with you. Anybody who's thinking about this, who needs to know how to make a living while on the road or make some money from this, they can find out how to contact you. So I have all that information on the blog post on Next Part of Life that goes with this. But I wanted to ask you, living in Mexico, for 10 years off and up, do you think this is like the final expat destination for you? Or are you open to not just, not this being the base? Like, are you open to any other countries that you thought in the back of your head, maybe this one would be another place to have my base?
Well, I think we'll hold on to this house. Maybe we'll leave it to my daughter. I don't know.
Nice.
Eventually, we're all on a pedestrian street that's up like 40 some steps to get to. So
Oh, nice.
maybe when we're ancient and hobbling around, that we
You'll
won't
be
be able to come here anymore.
you have to get one of those people movers,
Yeah,
or those seats that go up the
yeah.
side.
So yeah, we might have to move somewhere flatter someday.
But
But
still
yeah,
in Mexico.
I don't know. I mean, like I said, we'll definitely go try some other places out for 2 or 3 months. I mean, I could see there's lots of places in the world I could see us hanging out for a good while, including your old home of Malta or Greece or
Oh,
somewhere like that.
cool.
Um, and we're going to go back to Southeast Asia in the fall if travel is open again, and spend a little time there for a couple months on end. And there's places in South America I really like too that I could see myself living. We actually thought about moving to Argentina at one point in time till we realized, like Spain, nobody goes out to eat before like 11 at night. And
Yeah.
there's some other weird idiosyncrasies that I think I would have a hard time getting used to. But why we decided not to was just the distance and the flight problems. But I could definitely see myself going there for 3 months or 6 months and, maybe not
eating
becoming
steak
a
every
permanent
night.
resident. But yeah. And that area around, Bariloche and further south in Patagonia is just gorgeous. I mean, it's like Switzerland or Western Canada, gorgeous lakes and snow-capped mountains and all that.
Nice. Well, that sounds wonderful. Now, I lied. I said that was my last question, but I have I have a last question, and this is sort of like advice. What advice would you have for somebody who's thinking about writing or moving to another country, especially? What would you give them as like any sort of wise advice you could give them?
Yeah, well, whether it's writing or something else, it's much, much easier these days to work remotely and, still keep working than it was 10 years ago. And this pandemic has actually accelerated that. That's another one of those trends that we saw coming, and this kind of sped everything up. I mean, there are lots of companies that were operating completely remotely before this, but now a lot of the big boys, as we say, have started catching on to this fact that it can work just as well. I mean, as long as you have self-motivated people working for you, there's nothing wrong with them working in their house and doing some Zoom calls now and then. So, look into that. If your passion's writing, then great. There's plenty of ways to earn a living in doing that, or at least, some kind of side hustle. But there's lots of other things that can be done remotely. So look at your skill set and what you can offer. And a lot of jobs that used to require you to show up at an office don't anymore. So if it's any kind of thing that can be done on a computer, it can probably be done wherever you want to live in the world. And whether that's working for a company or running your own business or working as a freelancer, there's lots of opportunities out there. So take a long walk, get out a sketch pad, start putting some ideas on paper, whatever. But, even if you work in some physical job now, there's probably something else you could be doing that you could do remotely.
That's great. Now, Tim, please remind us all before we leave your website and any other websites you want to drop on us.
Well, if you're looking at moving abroad, I've got lots and lots of free information on my blog that's called the cheapestdestinationsblog.com. No the in there, cheapestdestinationsblog.com. Or you can always search my name, Tim Leffel, Leffel. There's not many people with that name, so I'm pretty easy to find.
Yes, he is.
What I've written, my portfolio site out there is just my name, and it links to everything else.
Yeah, so if you've got like about a half a day, you can read up on like all the stuff that he's actually done and the awards and the magazines and all that stuff. So you'll find
I do want to point out I've got two really good virtual assistants that help me out. So people look at my output and go, God, when do you ever sleep? But I do have some help, and I would strongly advise that if you're starting to feel overwhelmed, you can find somebody to offload some things to.
That's great. Well, Tim, thank you so much for joining me today. This was really fun. And I was so glad to hook up with you and finally get you to sit down for an interview with me. I hope everybody listening to this checks out his website. It's really chock full of great advice. And if you check out the book, you won't be disappointed. That's all I have to say. So if you're thinking about this, definitely check out the resources that he's got for you. And on that note, we'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for joining me, everyone. And don't forget to subscribe. Bye. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for having me on.